Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Juan Ulloa, and I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Ward 2 Democrats. On behalf of my colleagues at the Capitol Stonewall Democrats and the DC Young Democrats, we welcome you to this evening's forum with the shadow senator candidates, Mr. Eugene Kinlow and Mr. Ankit Jain. This is a very important but typically not as well-known position in government, but hopefully tonight you will walk away much more educated about the roles and the two gentlemen that are vying for it. Keep in mind also that mail-in ballots should have started arriving into your mailboxes. So this is an excellent time to do your due diligence and get to know the candidates in this race. What will follow now is each candidate will have a 2-minute introduction. And in this specific order, Mr. Jain will go first and then Mr. Kinlow. All right. And now I'd like to pass it on to Howard Garrett.
Hello, everyone. As Juan mentioned, thank you guys so much for being with us today. Before we begin with the questions, we will allow each candidate to give 2-minute introductions. And after which introductions that they give, we will go into the questions. And the first start off will be Ankit Jain, and then Eugene will follow.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the Ward 2 Democrats, the Stonewall Democrats, and all the DCYD and everybody else who's organized this. It's really important forum to learn about the shadow senator race. So I'm coming to you from the great Ward 2. I'm a little bit biased, but I got to say I'm a Ward 2 man myself. And I'm really excited to be here talking with people in Ward 2 and around the city. My name is Ankit Jain. I'm a voting rights attorney with the organization Fair Vote. And before that, I worked for 4 years as an attorney with the Sierra Club doing environmental work. Now, I've engaged in numerous legislative advocacy campaigns advancing important bills and regulations forward with both of those organizations. And I'm doing this because I have dedicated my life to moving forward voting rights and social justice rights for people in DC and around the country. And I truly believe in democracy. I believe that the people have the right to control their own destiny and that we know what's best for us. And, you know, we are denied that right here in Washington, D.C., and I am fighting to make sure we become the 51st state and get the rights that every other citizen of this nation receives. And I'll just close by saying, you know, I don't take democracy for granted. My parents came here to India, from India to the U.S. as immigrants. My dad came here on a student visa, and he had to apply for a green card. And he had to sleep in line overnight outside his local immigration office to get his green card and get on the pathway to a vote. And, you know, my parents worked so hard to gain the right to vote, only to see their son lose that right when he decided to cross the river into the city. And the people of DC, we deserve the same rights that every other citizen of this nation receives. That is the right to vote, the right to influence our government, and the right to control our own destiny. That is what I will be fighting for as your shadow senator. And I have the vision and experience to get what we deserve out of Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ankit. Eugene.
All right. Well, good evening, Democrats. Hi, I'm Eugene Kinlow. I am greeting you from beautiful downtown Ward 8 in the community of Bellevue, where I've been a resident for most of my life, living on the same street as my mom and dad. So let me throw out, I've been active in Democratic activities for a long time. I used to be a member of Gertrude Stein Democratic Organization. I'm a former chair of the Ward 8 Democrats. I was a former delegate representing Barack Obama in 2008 and was a former committee man for Ward 8. So I'm no stranger to politics here in Washington, D.C. I first became familiar with this issue of statehood when I was a child. My dad was dressed up like a Native American throwing tea into the river. Well, and he did it, and I didn't understand it. I thought it had something to do with the football team, but it actually had something to do with statehood and DC voting rights and taxation without representation. So I've learned this very early to be a supporter of DC voting rights and statehood. I've been working on this issue about 20 years. I've worked at DC Vote, where I led their outreach efforts, growing their coalition from 20 to 100 organizations. I have organized protests at the conventions in 2008. I was there in 2004. I've organized protests in 2011. So I'm strangely familiar, uniquely familiar with this issue. For the last 8 years, I worked for Mayor Bowser, Director of Office of Federal and Regional Affairs, and led the city's first statehood office. I made investments in statehood, not just investments in people and going out into the states and through organizations, but making sure that groups and organizations could receive grant monies over the last couple of years, a couple of $100,000. Over the last 8 years, we've put probably about $10 million in statehood, so more millions of Americans know about our issue. I am qualified, I'm certified, I know this issue, and I'm ready to go on day one. Vote Kinlow.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Thank you so much, Ankit. Before we begin, I do want to briefly give a little bit more information or an update on our endorsement process. All ballots, if you were qualified to vote as a Capitol Stonewall Democrat member, all ballots should have been in your inbox for 2 weeks ago. Voting will end on May the 20th. If you have not received your ballot or feel as if that you were qualified to be a part of the endorsement process, please feel free to email Elizabeth Mitchell. She will put her contact information in the chat box so you can reach out to her. As we go into the question portion, each candidate we will ask 6 questions. Each candidate will get 3 minutes to answer each question. Once your 3 minutes is up, you will be muted so we can move on to the next candidate or the next question. If you don't feel as if that you need to use the 3 minutes, feel free to step back so the next candidate can have their time to get their moment. Do we have any questions before we begin?
No.
All right. As we begin, the first question. Republican leaders have shared plans such as Project 2025 about rolling back protections and rights for women and for everyone in the LGBTQIA plus community. How would you use your position as shadow senator to protect impacted communities, not only here in DC, but also those across the US who are increasingly facing legislative attacks, threats of violence? Eugene, you first.
Okay, so I think the first thing we're going to have to do is make alliances with Democrats and strengthen the pool of Democrats. We know that elections matter. We know that statehood matters for Washington, D.C. And so in the context of statehood, of course, the perfect alignment is House, Senate, and White House, that we've got that alignment. But for this particular issue, just to make sure that we can diminish the Republicans that would be putting forth this legislation, we've got to strengthen our hand and make sure that we are strengthening, we're putting supports in to candidates that can win out into the states, that can counter some of these radical Republican ideologies. And we need to be able to overcome them by putting money into PACs, where we can write, where we can have op-eds and editorials in the districts of some of these members of Congress who would push this. And of course, we need to be always visible, having rallies, direct action on those targets, and influencing their constituents. I find that making sure that their constituents understand this issue and finding and pulling out their constituents to be a part of this issue makes it more impactful for us here in Washington, D.C. So I think that we just have to continue to be active, encourage voting, circle the wagons when it comes to Democrats, and make sure we do direct action on those targets. And I yield my time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's 2 parts to this question. The first is, how are they going to attack the LGBTQ plus community in DC? And the second is, how are they going to attack that same community nationwide? So I want to take that first part of the question first. So, you know, Republicans nationwide have made attacking trans rights, attacking LGBTQ plus rights, their latest, you know, it's the latest fad in Republican politics, the latest attack line that they're trying to use to win votes. And you know, they have a lot of ideas, and some of those ideas are very unpopular, and they might not be able to do them in the rest of the country. But Washington, D.C., they like to use us as their guinea pigs, right? Everything bad that they want to do around the country, they want to test drive in Washington, D.C. because they can, because we don't have the rights and we don't have a representative to fight back against it. And so I want to be that representative fighting back against their attacks on the LGBTQ plus community in DC. And what that means is we need somebody, statehood is important, but we need somebody who's engaged on all the issues affecting Washington, DC that Congress is considering. And that's what I'm going to be doing on day one. You know, in my time at Fair Vote and at Sierra Club, I've engaged in these kinds of advocacy campaigns trying to stop dangerous legislation, both federal and local legislation and statewide legislation attacking vulnerable communities. And so I will be active I'll be establishing relationships with important and key members of Congress and especially our Virginia and Maryland delegations to fight back against any attempts they use to use DC as a guinea pig for their far-right MAGA agenda. And then I will be out there getting support, rallying support from within DC and outside DC to beat back these efforts to attack our rights here in DC. So that's number one, is somebody who's engaged and active and who knows what he's doing to fight back against this radical agenda. In terms of the nationwide fight, you know, DC, there was just a report came out that found that DC was the gayest city in the US. And by gayest, I mean, you know, the most LGBTQ plus friendly city in the US, most highest population of that group in the US. And so we have a unique perspective here in DC that we really have such a strong LGBTQ plus population. We should be leading the charge in favor of these rights nationwide and against attacks that people make against this community nationwide. And so I'm going to be marshaling the support from within that community and pushing back against nationwide efforts to attack the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you both. Our second question. In 2022, the district was shortchanged by almost $750 million in the first round of COVID relief funding because we were treated as a territory rather than a state. In 2023, Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill overturned a DC crime bill that would have modernized our laws, which had not been substantially updated for decades. This was a significant blow to DC home rule and our rights to self-governance. How would you use your role as U.S. Shadow Senator to ensure that Congress, along with the White House and other leaders, do not treat the district in such unjust manner? With this question, we'll start with Ankit first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the Shadow Senator position is really our advocate to fight back against these kinds of attacks on DC where they're repealing local laws or they're not funding us to the ability we should. And the position just really has not been used effectively up until now. And so what I want to do is bring a strategic perspective and a dedicated and relentless focus to this position. And so I will be, heavily engaged in these efforts in two different ways. One is that if we have a law that the council is thinking about passing that could, potentially be controversial before the Congress, I want to be working with the council and being a kind of a go-between between the council and Congress to understand what we have coming for us so we're not hit by surprise. And are there ways we can, change the messaging on a bill or maybe tweak a bill a little bit to get around some of that controversy that Congress is going to, attempts that Congress is going to make to overturn it. I'm not talking about, not moving forward on important laws because it's going to be attacked by MAGA Republicans. I don't think we should do that. But I think there are ways we can, tweak laws and work on messaging to reduce the likelihood that these laws are attacked by Republicans in Congress. So, I mean, I think that's number one. The second thing is we need somebody who's engaged and active on the Hill, who's out there lobbying members of Congress. I've been doing that every day in my day job with Fair Vote and previously with the Sierra Club. And I'm going to be establishing strong relationships with people on the Hill to make sure they understand what is going on here. And I just want to share one story about what I'm talking about. I talked with a statehood advocate who was very active during the attempts to repeal the criminal code reform. And what he told me was that members, staff members in Congress were calling and texting him saying, hey, I'm hearing this talking point. How do you think I should respond to that? And, he's really a strong and effective advocate. So he gave good answers. But what I was thinking is, why are they texting him? And why are they not texting our shadow senators whose job it is to be the person, making these kinds of arguments? And so that's what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be an effective and collaborative advocate to fight back against these efforts by Congress to repeal our local laws or to fund us in a manner that is not appropriate. And I think that's what we need in this position. And that's what the job of the shadow senator is.
Eugene, you may proceed.
Okay, so you identified a few things that were unfortunate incidents. You mentioned the short gap in CARES funding of $755 million, and you talked about the disapproval resolutions. Well, the unfortunate thing about Washington, D.C. is that there's always going to be something, whether it's HIV funding, whether it's a woman's right to choose, whether it's can we call out our National Guard. There will always and continue to be an assault on Washington, D.C. And in the more recent years, we've been able to get more Democrats to see things our way. And we've seen that and demonstrated for H.R. 51, the vote for statehood in the House that's passed twice in the last few years. We've seen an increase on the Senate of the senators who understand, and at least we think that most of them understand where we are, since we've got about 46 senators on board. But unfortunately, we are not able to keep everyone on our side because politics matters to them, messaging matters to them back at home. So on the disapproval resolutions, and you saw it up close and personal, our council was just excoriated by members of Congress, and each of the council members was looked upon as just an evil person in their eyes and attacked. And so not only did Republicans support the disapproval resolutions, but we got Democrats as well. And that was unfortunate. So what we need to do, one, is just to make sure that we can keep our Democrat corpus strong. And with that, we're just going to have better relationships. Now we try, but I think that we can do a better job of making sure that we do. One of the things that we started a number of years ago is for new members of Congress, the mayor had a reception because they come to Washington, D.C. They don't think anybody lives here. They think it's a place of monuments, memorials, and museums, that the only people who live here are lobbyists and attorneys. We need to show them that we are regular people just like them, teachers, cab drivers, to drive the narrative to their constituents that we are just like them. We need to do a better job of making sure that there's alignment with our issues as well. I mean, we can get outside of Washington, D.C. We can be joining with the caucuses, the Democratic caucuses, and one to make sure that our region is strong. On the short gap of $755 million, when we found out that there was a difference, we reached out to our regional delegation because they're senators. They were not even aware. Very few people were aware because it was done in the last few seconds. But we got their support. Once we let them know about it, we got their support, we got their attention. We just need to keep people engaged.
Thank you both. For our third question, to the degree that you are able, will you commit to hiring at least one LGBTQIA staff member and/or intern? And will you also commit to prioritizing hiring a person under the age of 40? Eugene, you're up first.
Okay. My goal is to look for the best person. I'm not taking anybody off the table. Everybody would be welcome in my office at any age level, whether they're 80 years old or they're under 40, whether they are black, brown, red, white, and whatever orientation they are. I am looking for the best people from Washington, D.C. to fit that bill. So I'm not going to categorize, but all are welcome, because I believe that I'd like to have an office that represents Washington, D.C. and the diversity of Washington, D.C. But I want the best in that diversity at every category. So the office will be an open office and be a proud office once you see it of the diversity. But I can't call to say which aspects of the office. If there's a person that's 105 years old, they're welcome. Anybody can be a part of this office. Thank you.
Thank you. Ankit?
Well, I just note that and make sure the timer is running, right? Okay, got it. I mean, the first thing to the under 40 thing, I think if we care about, getting young people involved in politics, we should elect a young person to represent us, right? So I'm under 40, and I think it's really important to bring that perspective to this position, because we have a lot of young people in our city who are often not involved and not represented in our government. And I'm trying to bring that representation to our government. So that's the first thing I'll say. In terms of hiring within the office, the office itself, my understanding is that there's actually only 2 staff members, full-time staff members within the office. And so one of the things I think we need to do is get more funding for this office. And if we care about statehood, we should, show it by funding the people who are advocating for it in an appropriate manner. And I think we haven't had great relationships with the council in our current, shadow senator delegation, and that has harmed our ability to get funding for the office. And I hope to, utilize my relationship, my seriousness, and my ability to, connect, to show that I can actually get the job done, to get some more funding for the office so we can hire more people for the office and be more effective. And so that's number one. The second thing is that, the office does have some amount of money, but there's not a lot of transparency on where it goes. And so I would like to be more, have a greater sense of where is this funding going? And the first thing I'm going to be doing when I'm getting into office is having an understanding of where the money is going and making sure the people of DC can understand where the money is going. If we're using money ineffectively, let's change how we use that money so that we can actually use it effectively. And finally, the third thing I'll say is that I am interested in making sure that we have diversity amongst the staff we hire. That's going to be a priority for me. I think if we can get more, it'll be easier to get diversity. I do think that we need to look for people who are diverse and who are going to contribute effectively to the office. So we need to make sure we have somebody who's doing the job well and who's reflecting the diversity of our city. Finally, on the interns front, I'm happy to have interns. I am personally somebody who believes in paying our interns. And so I think that we're going to need to make sure we get funding to pay our interns, because interns do crucial work and they should be paid for the work that they do.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Eugene. As we go into our fourth question, Ankit, you'll go up first. Please offer specific examples of how you have used your professional and or volunteer positions to advance and protect members of the LGBTQIA community. Let me start the timer. And you may begin.
Yeah, so I mean, I currently work with Fair Vote, and before that, I worked with the Sierra Club. I think that both of these organizations are really focused on making what can we do to protect the rights of our LGBTQIA+ population. I'll say with Fair Vote, one of the things I'm really focused on is representation for minority communities, and that is something that our current electoral system often does not provide. When we talk about ranked choice voting and proportional ranked choice voting, that gives us an opportunity to make sure that these communities have greater representation. And one of my platform points actually is, DC has a constitution, and 2 years after we get statehood, we have the ability to go to a constitutional convention to consider changes to that constitution. And I am focused on making sure that we have an electoral system that makes sure that all minority communities in the city are properly represented, including the LGBTQ+ community. Like I said, we're one of the gayest cities in the country, and we only have one openly gay council member on the council. And before him, I think we might have had 0 before Councilmember Parker was elected. And so what can we do to make sure that minority communities like the LGBTQ+ community are able to get political power? And that is something I am 100% focused on. And I'll add one more thing is I worked for a Senate campaign, the Patrick Murphy Senate campaign in Florida after my time in undergrad. And we were really fighting for gay rights in that campaign. We ran against Marco Rubio, who's an opponent to the LGBTQ+ community. And we were trying to make sure we had senators in the Congress who were fighting for gay rights. And so I was really focused on electing our senator who was a champion of gay rights. And so I've been active on this front, and I'm really committed to moving this forward when I'm elected as shadow senator.
Thank you.
All right, so I think it's valuable to have diversity and diverse partners. When I was at DC Vote, and looking at the coalition that we had, that at the time was probably about 20 organizations, I did an audit, and the audit revealed that even though we talked about Washington, D.C., and we're a very diverse city, we didn't really have it in the organizations that represent us on human rights and making sure that we had D.C. democratic rights pushed out throughout the states. So we sought out and reached out to some key leaders to make sure that we were able to get on board locally. Of course, Gertrude Stein, reaching out to the Human Rights Campaign, getting them involved in our battle, making sure that we're crossing the lines to make sure, in addition to this population, making sure that we're reaching out to other human rights populations as well, whether it's labor, organized labor, the faith community, the variety of faiths. So to make this movement strong for DC statehood and DC voting rights, we're going to really need to make sure that we exhaust every column of diversity that exists. Whatever faith, we need to make sure that we expand it to every faith, because every faith lives here in Washington, D.C. We need to make sure that the professional organizations are involved. Every ethnicity is involved. So I think that those are some of the things that I've done in the past, but surely I have worked with a lot of organizations, and one of the key tenets of everywhere I've been is making sure that I have a staff that looks like Washington, D.C. And oftentimes that staff will be Black, brown, gay, Hispanic, Asian, and try to look like of the world. So that's my response. Thank you.
Thank you both. As we go into our last question, I do want to remind participants, if you do have a question that you would like to ask, please put it in the chat and we will see to make sure that is asked within this forum. As we go into our last question, please offer examples of how you have used your profession and or volunteer positions to advance and amplify the voices of the young people in our community. Eugene, you're first.
Okay, well, young people are part of every movement. I was a youth advocate and activist. I was a graduate of the University District of Columbia and a student government president. So I have been active. My parents were student activists. Many of them come to Washington, D.C., and they stay. I found that in nurturing and being supportive of our young people a couple of different ways through the educational silos. My wife used to be on the Board of Education here in Washington, D.C., and we would always encourage young people to be a part of the political process. And through the Marion Barry Youth Leadership Institute and through other youth silos in the city, we would encourage their participation and nurture them. At the University of District of Columbia, where I was a trustee for 2 terms and recently just came off of UDC from being on the search committee for the new president. One of my things that I always loved doing was making sure that I was going to be on the student committee, because we got to be in contact with our young people. That right there provided the energy and fire, because you're supporting and building new leaders. And the question 2 questions ago, we talked about young people and guaranteeing that there would be a position. And when I look back and reflect on Capitol Hill, no matter what senator may be 80 years old or 90 years old, if you look at this staff, really, Washington, D.C., particularly on Capitol Hill, is run by a lot of folk in their 20s and 30s. We need to make sure that our young people are in the pipeline for leadership here in Washington, D.C. Of course, a lot of folk in Washington, D.C., they can go for the delegate, but there are no senators. We need to make sure that we've got more young people that participate in the political process up on Capitol Hill, working perhaps even in some of the regional offices and some beyond, so they make a greater impact in Washington, D.C., and the world and beyond. I've got 2 young kids. Well, actually, they're not that young anymore. One's an attorney here in Washington, D.C., and one works for a nonprofit. I think they came out all right, but I look upon them as student leaders. They're active in every aspect of the community, whether it's environmental community, whether it's about crime and safety and neighborhood issues as well. I think that the youth of the future, you see it right now with all the protests throughout the country. It's exciting to see the next generation keenly aware and involved in determining what the next 10 or 20 years of this country are going to look like.
Right, so Howard's having a little trouble seeing the chat with the timer. He's wearing a lot of hats tonight, so I was going to pull a couple from and also from some text messages that I've gotten and some from the Zoom registration.
Should I? Sorry, Elizabeth. Should I answer the question first before?
Oh my gosh! Yes, I'm so sorry.
No worries. Yeah.
Yes,
no worries.
absolutely. I apologize.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's a very important question, and this has been a real focus of mine, really throughout my life. And the number one thing is, I think Eugene talked about getting young people participating on Capitol Hill representing DC. Well, I think the best way to get young people participating on Capitol Hill from DC is to elect a young person to represent DC on Capitol Hill. So I just want to emphasize so much. I think it's so important to have a representation and a voice from young people in this city fighting for our city, and that's what I would provide as your shadow senator. Uh, I just get so frustrated by the fact that there's so many young people in the city, many of whom are actually very politically involved on the national level who just don't understand what's going on in our local politics. And I have been really active in trying to change that. So I started the Young Democrats of Ward 2 with Howard, actually, and maybe a few others on this call, to get young people in Ward 2 involved in our local politics. We ran a three-part speaker series on housing costs in DC. It's just something that affects everybody, but particularly I think affects young people, and had a really strong attendance to understand what can we do to reduce rent costs in the city. Um, you know, um, I'm still active in trying to get young people involved with Ward 2 politics. Prior to my time with when I was in law school, I was actually one of the student organizers of the New York City March for Our Lives. For those who don't know, March for Our Lives is an anti-gun violence organization founded by and focused on fighting for young people who are too often the victims of gun violence across the country, and especially in our city in DC. And so I was extremely active in fighting, getting some young people's perspective on how can we fight gun violence. I was a president of March for Our Lives Manhattan when I was in law school. And then I'll say I'm an active member of DCYD as well. During my time in undergrad and law school, this was one of my main focuses as well, getting people, my classmates, involved in local politics. I was one of the main student organizers for the Obama 2012 campaign when I was an undergrad, and I was pushing my classmates to get involved in local politics because we need young people to express their concerns and get their issues out there, because if young people are not speaking up, then their concerns are going to be thrown away. People won't care. And so that is a huge focus of mine, making sure that we listen to young people and we get young people involved in local politics. And I will continue to do that as our shadow senator.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you, Eugene. All right. Monica, did you want to ask, or did you want me to take it from here?
I don't mind asking. Hello, everyone. I was just wondering what your first 60 days. I'm Monica Roche, Vice Chair of the Ward 2 Democrats. And within your first 60 days, what are your top 2 priorities if you are elected to this position?
Who should start with that one?
Ankit, you start first. Eugene started first the last time.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. I think that's a really important question because I think it really gets to the specifics, and I'm somebody who cares about the specifics. So I'm going to say 2 things. One is that what I have yet to see from the statehood movement is a clear strategy for how are we going to get the statehood bill passed. We have a lot of different ideas, but I haven't seen everybody coalesce on here's how it's going to happen, and here's a clear and politically feasible way for it to happen. So the first thing that I will do is make sure that everybody in the statehood movement in DC is on the same page and has the same idea of how it's going to happen. Whether that's the mayor or the council or DC Vote or whether it's the DC Dems, we all need to have the same strategy and be reading from the same playbook and rowing in the same direction. So I'm going to be a collaborator and a convener to make sure that we have a clear idea, like here's how the statehood bill is going to pass, and here's what each organization can contribute to that cause. And once we have a roadmap, I think that's when we can really get moving and make sure that the bill actually passes. The second thing I'm going to do is, we have a lot of nationwide partners who care about democracy nationwide, who do care about DC statehood, but maybe don't make it their first priority. And I'm talking about organizations like the League of Women Voters, like the NAACP, like the ACLU, like the Brennan Center. And we need DC statehood to be one of their top, if not their number 1, at least their number 2 or number 3 priority. Because what is a greater democracy concern than 700,000 tax-paying American citizens being denied the right to vote? So I want those organizations to make DC statehood a priority for them because they have members in the districts and states of these senators and representatives who actually do have a vote on DC statehood, and they can get their members to call their senators and Congress members and tell them to vote in favor of the DC statehood bill. So I already have relationships with a lot of these groups, right? I work in democracy work as my day job, and I'm on calls with these kinds of organizations. And so I'm going to be working with these nationwide democracy organizations to making sure that they have DC statehood as one of their #1 priorities. And they're not going to sacrifice DC statehood to pass some other priority that they have, so that we can have a strong nationwide movement backing DC statehood.
Okay,
you,
thank
Ankit.
you so much.
Eugene?
Okay, so a lot of the organizations that Ankit mentioned, I engaged and brought to the movement. So I know you're talking about what you want to do and how you want to connect with them, but I've already connected with them. I've connected with quite a few organizations, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and many other organizations, working with local and national League of Women Voters for years, out in the states, connecting with league presidents all over the country. So some of that work is already being done. But I think probably one of the first things we want to do is have some people will call it a come to Jesus meeting with our local elected officials. The power structure here in Washington, D.C., we really need to sit down and talk about how we get ready for the next opportunity. Because for D.C. statehood, to get ready, it's all about that alignment when the House, the Senate, and the White House are all Democratic. If one of those factors is off, is one of those is Republican, then it's still not an opportunity. I mean, it's a shift in the right direction. So that alignment happens very infrequently. And I believe that a strong Democratic Party, one that is strong in messaging, will continue to make inroads and grow its base. So we need to be able to be able to help the Democratic Party reach a larger number of people, to show their strength and to understand what our issue is, and our issue should be inserted. If this is a Democratic year, I mean, this is a convention year. Convention is coming up, and the platform will probably already be set. The platform, there will be something on DC voting rights, and they will support it, but they need to see it earlier. It can't be something that happens every 4 years. We need to have them engaged before we actually go to the convention. So it's something that they see, maybe not every day, but they understand it because their elected officials, even at lower levels, are supportive of DC statehood. So that's one thing we can do. We got to level set it and get our and anticipate that alignment, so that when we have that alignment, we're pushing legislation and we know where our targets are. We always know where our folk are. Second, we need to be out in states every day. In Washington, D.C., 86% of the citizens, we understand D.C. Statehood, but we need to be out tomorrow. And it's not just me. It's not just Ankit if he's in. It is not just the statehood delegation, but all of our elected officials. Our mayor, our council, our ANCs, they are elected officials. We need to split this map up and be out in 50 states. And I'd like to go out and do a 51 state tour in 51 days. And I think we can do it to create mass education and awareness of our issue. And I think we can do it quickly.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Eugene.
much.
Thank you, Monica, for your question. James,
Sure.
you can ask your question if you like.
Sure. Thank you, Howard. I want to thank both the candidates for being here tonight and sharing their perspectives on the important issues facing the LGBT community. So I really appreciate that. Again, I'm James. I'm a voter and former DC Dems board member in Ward 2. My only question was, what experience do you both have, do each of you have as a manager of others that you feel makes you a good fit to be U.S. Shadow Senator?
Eugene, we'll start with you first.
Okay, well, I think that I have done a good job I've been a good manager of resources and people. One thing we all look out in this town for is waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Making sure that we've got accountability, making sure that we've got no leakage of resources, things are not leaving out the door, no fraud, nothing going on untoward, and making sure that everyone is accountable. So I went to school, graduated with a degree in business management. Planning, controlling, organizing are all basic tenets of management. And that includes the physical, financial, and human resources. So that's where we need to be.
Thank you. Ankit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two things to this, two things I want to say to this question. You know, first of all, I think it is so important to treat people who you supervise with respect and, you know, with admiration and really understanding. Uh, I think it really says a lot about who you are as a person and how you treat people who you have some sort of power over. And so that is something that I have been focused on every time, you know, in every person who I've managed. And to the degree, I mean, I think, you know, like, I think the proof is in the pudding. I have people who I've managed who are volunteering for my campaign because they like me as a person and they appreciate the work I did with them. And so that has really been a focus of mine, is making sure we get the best out of people by treating them with respect. You know, Eugene, he talks a lot about his experiences with the mayor's office. And you know, you just got to be honest, his experiences have not been very good. You talk about management. I think that's one of the core detriments that we saw with his time with the mayor's office, where he was not able to manage. You had immense turnover in his office, people cycling in and out, and people saying that there was, you know, abuse against them. And I don't want to get too much in, you know, into the specifics, because in the last forum, I think I went a little bit over the line. I want to apologize to Eugene for that. But I just think that, you know, if you're looking at experience and you compare my experience to Eugene's, I am ready. I am the one who's going to be effective and ready on day one to advance our rights. And Eugene has had the chance and he hasn't been able to do a good job. And there's a reason he doesn't work for the mayor's office anymore. And so I think that's what it comes down to. I am an effective and experienced advocate and manager, and I will be ready on day one. If you compare my experiences with Eugene's experiences, I'm somebody who can actually be effective and get the job done.
Okay, so I'm going to have to rebut that.
Yes, 30 seconds, please.
All right. So first of all, Ankit, I don't know where you're getting your information from, but you are incorrect. And I mentioned to you earlier today, I know as an attorney, you're supposed to be factually based. And for you to just to share rumors, unproven rumors is not the way that you should be playing this game. So with that, I'm proud of my record with the mayor's office. I spent 8 years. In this office in the new Washington, D.C., people come in, they stay 2 years and move on. I've been in 8 years. That's a lot of people, because that's the new standard in Washington, D.C. People don't stay 8 years. You know, you probably, the longest you've been someplace has probably been about 2.5, maybe not even that. But we're not going to talk about your record. Let me just tell you about my record. I'm proud of bringing over $100 million into the city every year.
10 seconds.
I'm proud of being the first manager of a statehood office ever. I'm proud of putting the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I've put into state.
Sorry, Eugene, I just muted you. I gave you 1 minute. Sorry about that.
Do
right.
I get a response, a 30-second response, since he mentioned me there?
Yes, you can get 1 minute. I gave him 1 minute.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, I just want to say I do respect the work that, Eugene, you have put into statehood efforts. I know this is something you've been engaged in for many years, and it's something that's really important. You know, we need to have people who are engaged in this work. I know that it's something you personally care about, that you're passionate about, and I'm not questioning your commitment to the cause, right? And so I appreciate everything you have done for the statehood movement over the past, you know, 10 plus years. I think you talk about unproven statements I made. You can just Google Eugene Kinlow, Senate, Washington City paper. You can read the article for yourself. I'm just quoting the article that was published about some of these allegations. And so that's all I'm doing. Everybody can look for themselves. I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been sourced and quoted in a well-reputed organization. And so I respect Eugene's work, but he's just been shown he's not been up to the task in the past.
Thank you, Ankit. Now we'll move on to our next question. Travis, if you have the capacity to do so, you may ask your question. Okay. All right, Travis. No. Philip Purnell, if you are in the position to ask your question, you may go next.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I put it in the chat, so I'm just basically regurgitating what is already written. I just would like to know if the candidates feel that there's a role for civil disobedience in the statehood movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Philip. Eugene went first. Ankit, you're first this time. You're muted.
Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. You think I'd have figured this out by now, but this happened. So, yes, Phil, I 100% believe there's a role for civil disobedience in the statehood movement. I am someone who believes in nonviolent direct action to get what we want, but I believe it needs to be strategic and targeted. Every time we do something, we need to say, is this advancing our cause forward, or is this going to cause a backlash that's going to make people upset at us? And so I am committed to considering that as an option. I'm willing to get arrested for DC statehood. I know Eugene has already gotten arrested, so I appreciate what he's done for DC statehood. I am 100% willing to get arrested, and I think that we need to consider how can we take strategic, nonviolent, direct action to advance the cause of DC statehood forward, because the people of DC we can walk, bike, metro, bus, we can drive to our capital. And so we should be more active. We shouldn't be letting members of Congress who trample over our rights just get away and enjoy the benefits of our city while they're attacking our rights. And so it's something that we need to think about and be more active on. And I'm 100% in support of that. We just need to make sure it's strategic and effective in advancing our cause forward.
Thank you, Ankit. Eugene? You're muted as well.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think civil disobedience is a tool. There's a lot of tools in the toolkits. And I've seen a variety of tools used here in Washington, D.C., because I've helped initiate a number of them. Some of the largest arrests that occurred around DC voting rights occurred in 2011. In that year, you've got probably like over 70 people that got arrested, most of them within probably 2 months. Huge protest to begin, and then civil disobedience. And I think it was great because it created a flashpoint of education for folk throughout the country. But I didn't think it was not sustainable. I mean, the goal was if we can get almost every Washingtonian or every adult Washingtonian or every student involved in it, it would create something that could spread to other campuses, other young people would be involved, and it didn't happen. But I think that it still becomes a valuable tool. Mayor Gray got arrested, Mayor Bowser got arrested, Councilmember Tommy Wells got arrested, and a number of other council members. And
That's Eugene Kinlow, the shadow senator.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, but I think that there's room, but there's a lot of different tools that we have not used. We have not used the tools of celebrity. Where's celebrities in Washington, D.C.? Everybody comes to D.C., whether you're the Pope, whether you're a sports star, whether you are a pop star. We have to use this location and use the celebrity and the followings of 5 or 10 million. If Taylor Swift comes to Washington, D.C., hey, but maybe she needs to wear a t-shirt that says DC statehood. There's a lot of things that we have not used, and there's a lot of places that we have not gone. I think that we need to get out of Washington, D.C. a little bit more and a little bit more regularly, setting up offices throughout the country, or temporary offices or mobile offices. So there are a number of things that I think that we can do, but I do support that tactic because we've done it before, and it did gain quite a bit of visibility. Everybody was trying to figure out who was going to get arrested next. It was a good mix. It was very diverse. Religious leaders, labor leaders, organizational leaders on a variety of issues, HIV, just so many different issues. It was a good look for the movement, and we can keep doing that. But we got to find the right time. It can't just be every week. And on an issue that's not heavy, it's got to be something that is like when we are getting super close to an alignment in the House, Senate, and the White House, and then something like that will bring a national attention.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to our last question before closing remarks. Elizabeth, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I had a really interesting experience this week. I got to testify in front of a panel at the U.S. Civil Rights Commission regarding some violations that are happening right now in DCPS and in our education system. I've heard a lot about how you're planning on pushing statehood, but something that I don't think we pay enough attention to is how federal policies really impact people that live here in DC, and the fact that right in our own backyard, there are lawmakers and legislators who are looking for input from citizens just like us. How do you plan on using your office, if elected, to connect DC residents like myself to the panels that are making laws, that are making policy, that are making funding available in places that would really help people like myself and my family?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Eugene, you're first.
Okay, I think that if we go back to what is the role of the senator, and I won't say shadow senator, there are really three different silos. And of course, the first is to defend democracy. If there's an assault on Washington, D.C., if members of Congress were doing something untoward, it is our job to be the shock troops and the first responders to say, that is wrong. This is the remedy. You got it wrong. You need to take it back. We need to correct your record in front of your constituents. That's the first job. The second job is one of advancing DC statehood, which it just by itself could be a full-time job. You've got 50 states, you've got members of Congress, you've got members of the House, educating counties, cities, working with the media. But the third piece that is not talked about that much, but is surely relevant, is making sure that we've got relationships and access to the halls of power. That we're in dialogue and conversation with members of the Senate and their staff regularly, and trying to find a way to keep the dialogue going. The best way we can do that is to showcase Washington, D.C. citizens. Let them know that this is the citizens. If you need somebody for a panel, if you need somebody, if you need a think tank or somebody to support a think tank, we have people with great brain power right here in Washington, D.C. from all walks of life, and we need to be able to include them in what happens on the Hill. But the first piece and the second piece is probably where we spend most of our time here in Washington, D.C. The third piece, probably not so much, probably because it probably keeps us a little bit more wedded in the dialogue on Capitol Hill, and they may not have open arms for us. Frankly, there's a lot of hand office, people keep hands off in Washington, D.C. I've talked to almost every shadow senator, and they talk about the difficulty, and not just meeting with the senator, but perhaps when you go meet with the senator and you meeting with the most junior person on his staff that is an intern that's been in Washington, D.C. for a couple months. But we still need to make those overtures and create those relationships.
Thank you. Ankit?
Yeah, I think there are three things to this question. The first thing is, one thing that I would like to do more of in this office is constituent service. So we do have 2 staff members, and I'm hoping we can increase that number, that are full-time and working for the office. And I think one of their responsibilities should be doing constituent service and taking calls from people in DC who want to need help or want to be connected with certain programs that are federal programs or federally funded, and are having trouble doing so. And being able to answer those people's complaints and call the agencies and work with the agencies to resolve their concerns and to connect those people with the people they should be connected with. And so I will be really making sure that whoever I hire or whoever our office hires as staff is a good constituent servant and is working with the people in DC to address some of their concerns with the federal government, because this is our connection for the people of DC to our federal government, this position. The second thing I'll say is that I think it's really important for the shadow senator to be making sure that people who are doing important work in DC are getting funded with all these federal programs and federal dollars that our Congress gives out. And too often, DC is shortchanged in like so many different ways in these funding in these federal bills that fund different things. And I'm not even just talking about like a COVID relief bill where it's $750 million. I'm talking about like, $2 million increment that should be going to people in DC and are not, because we don't have somebody advocating for our rights for the Senate. So I want to be involved in those kinds of decisions too, and say, hey, this bill that you're passing, you didn't fund DC, or you didn't fund this program in DC the way you would have funded another jurisdiction. And making sure we get federal funding for those issues. That is something I think we can make real progress on, because we're talking more technocratic issues. That is not something that a Republican will be like, how dare you do this? And so I really want to work on that. It's connecting people doing good work in DC with people who fund that good work in the Congress. The final thing I'll say is I'm actually, I'm not just, talking a lot. I'm actually doing the work. I'm in the process of starting a democracy hub in DC to connect all the different people doing different kinds of democracy work, from statehood to electoral reform to civil, to making sure that we have civic health and people can disagree without being disagreeable, to make sure we have local journalism that is shining a light of transparency on our government. All of those different things and more. There's so many people who are working in silos, and I'm trying to de-silo that work and make sure that those people are talking with each other and supporting each other's work, so that we can be most effective when we work together.
Thank you. That will conclude our questions for this evening. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, Ankit. Now, you each will have 2 minutes to offer closing statements. Since Ankit went first the first time, Eugene, you'll go first this time.
Okay, great. Well, one, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. I think the exchange was valuable. Now, the real question I think before us is, why would anyone want to run for a job that has little staff, no real energy in its office, and why, and on an issue of DC statehood that has almost an improbable chance of passing today? When you think about that, it's like, wow, that's, it's pushing the boulder uphill. But the answer is that no matter how improbable or hard, you want the best person in that position. You want the person who's got the best chance of success. And in this race, I'm the person with the best chance of success. I'm the best person because I've got the best relationships. I've done the work, one. I've got relationships with elected officials locally, nationally, in the party. I've gone out to conventions to talk to Democrats. I've gone to Republican conventions to talk to them. We go wherever the people are to convince them. I have the experience. I've made the investments in this movement. So it's not just about people, it's about personnel, it's about investments out in the states, it's about infrastructure, and we have laid this work out over a number of years. So I know that I'm the best person for this job because I know the people, I know the processes, and I have the plan. I've got a plan that I'm ready to start on day one. I've got a Rolodex that I can access even before I start, and I'm ready to go. So I'm not new to the game, I'm true to the game, and I'm asking for your vote and support. Vote Eugene Kinlow, U.S. Senator for Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Ankit?
Yeah, I want to thank the panel, Howard, for being an excellent moderator, and everybody who organized this event, and most importantly to everybody who's tuning in right now, for being involved in your local democracy, because it's so important. So my name is Ankit Jain. I'm a voting rights attorney with the Fair Vote. Before that, I worked for 4 years as an attorney with the Sierra Club doing environmental work. I will be an effective, collaborative, and independent voice for DC as your next shadow senator. I have the vision for what this position can do, and I'll bring a fresh perspective on how to get what we want out of Congress. And I have the legislative advocacy experience we need from our chief advocate for the U.S. Senate. I work every day at Fair Vote, and I worked every day at the Sierra Club on advancing important bills and regulations forward. I've seen how the sausage gets made, and I've been involved in legislative advocacy campaigns, and I want to use that experience, and I want to use my connections with the nationwide pro-democracy movement with members on the Hill to advance the cause of DC statehood forward. And, you know, I'm doing this because I've dedicated my life to protecting people's right to vote. I truly believe in democracy, and I believe that the people of DC deserve the right to vote and to control their own destiny. And I will be fighting every day as your shadow senator to defend and advance that right. I'm somebody who's effective, collaborative, and independent, and I'll be ready on day one. I hope I can earn your vote for shadow senator on the Democratic primary on June 4th. Again, my name is Ankit Jain, and I would be honored to get your vote. Thank you very much.
Ankit Jain, Eugene Kinlow, on the behalf of the Capitol Stonewall Democrats, the Ward 2 Democrats, and the DC Young Dems, we thank you for taking out the time to joining us tonight, for us to hear about your thoughts, your concerns, and your actions as what you would do to be an effective shadow senator. We thank you again as well for running for office and wanting to serve our community. Unfortunately, there was another event tonight scheduled for the Ward 7 candidates, and they were unable to participate. We have offered all Ward 7 candidates the opportunity to record a short 3-minute statement since they were unable to attend this meeting. We will be sharing the submitted videos as they come in on our social media platforms, and you will be able to hear their responses to the submitted questions. We also want to remind you and invite you to please join us again on May 13th for our second and final candidate forum. We'll be welcoming the DC Council candidates for Ward 4, Ward 8, and the at-large race, as well as candidates for U.S. Shadow Representative and the U.S. Delegate. Please RSVP if you have not yet, and the QR code or the link in our bio will be able to get you the RSVP. Last but not least, please come out and celebrate with us on May 21st at the Brig as we celebrate our endorsed candidates. Ballots for endorsed candidates are due on May 20th. Please reach out to Elizabeth Mitchell. Email is in the chat if you have not received your ballot. And as a reminder, voting eligibility resets each year on January 1st, and you had to renew your membership prior to April 20th, 2024 to be eligible to vote in the current endorsement process. More details can be found on our bylaws on our website. We thank you guys for joining, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Have a good night.
Thank you.